Wow. This white light makes me look so old. Okay, I'm just
You got that on recording.
I know. I'll have to cut that out. Give us a synopsis of Jadyn. Give us a synopsis of you.
Um, I was adopted at 14 months old, and I was adopted from China. Brought over here. I've lived in Florida my whole life, raised with the same group, small town kind of vibe. Um, and I graduated early. I graduated at Dayspring. Um, and with that, between church and Dayspring, I always grew up with music. Learning constantly, as you know. And even when I tried to quit, you still followed me at school.
Yeah.
So I had no choice to learn, which I'm so glad that happened anyways. And now I am in my last year for my bachelor's degree in digital communications. And I have no plans other than that. Just waiting on the Lord to see what He has for me. I really think that I'm going to be doing something in ministry. So we'll see what that is. It is all a game of patience and faith
Yes.
building. So,
Yes. That's so true. Patience and faith and just being willing to for whatever God has for you. Having ideas, of course, but not being too set in any particular thing. Um,
yes, precisely.
yeah, so cool. So, talk to us about your musical upbringing, your journey as a worship leader. Obviously, I know a little bit about your musical upbringing. But just for the sake of whoever may be watching.
Yeah, of course. So, for those who don't know, Benji actually taught me for quite a few years. He taught me my vocal lessons. He's my first teacher ever. Taught me vocal lessons, taught me piano. We even started on violin for a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Um, um, and yeah, that's happened when I was really little. When I was really young, I remember having like this tiny purple little keyboard with like yellow pedals for buttons. It was the cutest little thing, and I would teach myself by ear like how to play Happy Birthday or Mary Had a Little Lamb. And when my parents realized like, oh, she can actually play, like let's invest. That's that's when the lesson started, and then as I got older in like elementary school, I remember telling my mom, I was like, I never practiced and I feel bad and I think that I should just quit. And so I did quit, as you know.
Mhm.
And then going into middle school, you started as a choir teacher then. And I was like, hey, guess I didn't quit. So that happened, which was so great. Um, for leading all of that into worship, I remember being in middle school and I actually hated worship. Like,
Hmm.
it's so funny. I used to,
Interesting.
yeah, no, it so is. When I was younger, I loved church, loved kids' church. It was like, you know how kids' church goes. It's like a big
Sure.
party,
It's a party.
So just a big party.
Yeah.
When I got into middle school and went into Driven at Calvary Chapel Worship Center, I just did not care for the worship. And I would purposefully sleep in. Like I would be awake, but I would time the worship and I would look at my clock and I would say, like, okay, this is how long I have to sleep in order for my dad to let me sleep in and then he'll take me to church and I'll miss all of worship and go only for the sermon. So, and that was with both accounts for the epicenter and for, wow, my AirPods keep falling out. It's all a lie. They don't stick in your ear. Okay.
Wow.
Anyways, um, yeah, that was for the epicenter and for middle school. I just didn't care for it at all. And then when I got to high school, I met somebody. She was new. She was coming into Dayspring, which is where I went to school at. And she was telling me how she was on the worship team. And I was like, this girl's on the worship team? And I was like, it was
Wow.
really such a horrible start. And you can definitely see how the Lord grew my heart and all of that because I was like, if she can be on the worship team, I can be on the worship team. Like, I legit, it was such a competition for me. I was like, I can do
Mm.
better than that. And I was like, there's no,
Wow.
like, that was where my heart was. And
Goodness.
yeah, that's pretty much that's pretty much how it started in that sense. Um, Somewhere in between that, I did take lessons for guitar too, just throwing that in there. And then when I joined the worship team, I was an open book. I was like, you can put me anywhere, guitar, piano, vocals, whatever you need me to be in any area too, whether it's in kids or high school or epicenter. Um, I'm there. And I remember like still with that, like, it wasn't bitterness, but like just that, like, I don't know, that ungrateful heart, that jealous heart, you know?
Mm,
I was like, in my mind planning out how everything would go. I'm like, okay, if I'm friends with this person and I work for this person for this amount of time and I am patient, this is where it'll get me, you know?
mm.
Like
So
it was
strategic.
secretly so strategic. And I don't know why it mattered to me so much. Actually, I probably do. I just think, you know, with my personality type, for anybody who's watching who's into it, I'm an Enneagram 8. So Enneagram 8s love control, you know? And I feel like that's
Hmm.
probably where it was at. Like I wanted to show that I was more dominant than this person on the worship team.
Mm,
Legit, this was how it was for years. Like,
mm,
and I was like, and you know, everything comes in its time and everybody grows. And the worship team, the youth worship side at least, definitely had a lot of growing to do too. And there was this hierarchy that was there between all the youth that was a part of it. And I was like, I
mm.
can do that. Like, I'm going to get to the top.
Wow.
And I would befriend certain people, be patient. It was all manipulative in my head, you know? And
Mm.
then the Lord like really humbled me and it was like, girl, if you're going to be a part of this, you know, you better show my heart during
Yeah.
it. Like, it's not about you. And I was like, wow, okay, Jesus, like put me in my place for sure. But so glad he did, obviously. But
Was there like a
mm,
moment where that happened, or a service, or was it like a season of that revelation? Well, how did that?
um, I think it was a season. Like
Okay.
there was a point in time where I was still very prideful. I was like, I'm better than this person. I don't
Mm.
know why so many people like this person.
Wow.
And yeah, it was some extreme jealousy going on there. Um, but then when I realized, I guess, and I love this person. It's so funny. Like we're still friends. Like we just hung out like 2 days ago. But um I realized, you know, this person, once they had opened up to me and like showed me what's going on in their life and like
Mm-hmm.
showing me that they're relying on Jesus and they're not relying on like their own, you know, strategicness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I realized I was like, Jadyn, what are you doing? Like, there's nothing wrong with people loving this person because, and now I'm just was really hard on myself, but that's how I got through it, you know? Like, I was like, Jadyn, you know, you're being jealous over something that you can get yourself. You just need to apply yourself more. You can't rely on your own plans, basically. And if the Lord wants to raise you up in a certain position, He'll do it on His own. It won't be because of you. It'll be because people see that you love Jesus and that you're growing in Him, and not because you're forcing things on your own. Um, and that was like, I feel like it was a season, but specifically a service. I remember this person was praying on stage, and I was like, prayer has always been something I struggled with. Like, I never was a public prayer person. When I saw this person praying on stage, I was like, wow, like, that's like kind of where it hit me. I was like, Jadyn, what's wrong with you for hating somebody who loves Jesus? Like, what? That's so crazy in your
Wow.
mind, but you built up all this bitterness over what, you know?
Yeah.
So that's how that went. And then kind of from there, it was a lot of working on my own heart, obviously. And then the Lord did exactly that. He raised me up on His own time. And I grew into being the assistant director for worship at Calvary. And the process was so peaceful. Like I didn't have to do anything. I just had to be
Mm-hmm.
myself. And I was like, wow, imagine doing this, like, you know, from the beginning, how
Yeah.
easy your life would be.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your honesty. Okay, so can you tell us about um, I don't want to say the most, I'll say one of the most profound worship experiences you've had, or
Hmm.
moments, or it could have been when you were leading, it could have been when you were playing, it could have been when you were out in the congregation, it could have been when you were in the
Hmm.
car listening to something.
Yeah. I think one of the most profound was I was going through a really like a season of just heartbreak. I was in a relationship. I really loved this person. I thought they were the one, as everyone
Mm,
does when they're dating, right? And
mhm,
then the way everything fell through and the way it was communicated and like just the timing of things, I was really by myself dealing with all of it.
Wow.
Just it was at the very beginning of the semester, my first year of college, and I was driving to St. Pete. So I had an hour and 10 minutes
mhm,
every day on the way there and on the way back,
mhm,
of just like thinking thoughts to yourself. And I remember like being so upset with myself. I'm like, Jadyn, why can't you get over this? Because I never had put myself in a position to get hurt that badly. And it was all so new to me. And I remember just crying one day in my car, listening to music,
Around.
and I was worshiping and praying one time. And I remember like talking just out loud because I fully believed the Lord was with me. And I was like, Jesus, I'm so sorry I can't get over this quick enough. But I have absolutely nobody. So you're going to have to be my best friend for right now.
mm.
And like word for word what I said. And I remember so like audibly, like the Lord was like, I've just been waiting for you to say that. And I was like,
Wow.
wow. And then it just made me cry even more.
Wow.
But it was so that moment forward really just changed the whole game
Yeah.
for me. And
Wow.
so that was one, like probably one like worship helped in it. It was in the background, but that definitely was my most profound
Yeah.
like moment ever with the Lord.
Yeah.
Hmm.
How have your perspectives changed over the years and through serving, over through your experiences, you know, and not
Yeah.
like, you know, necessarily like where are you at in your faith, but just like I know so many
Hmm.
people have different perspectives on, what church is to them as a young person versus what church is to them as someone who's older.
Yeah. No, that's such a great question. That's a very big question. You're right.
It's a big question.
um, I think there's a lot of it's very stereotypical to fall out of church when you grow up in church. And same with like, when you are what's the word? I don't know. I can't think of it. But when you are very like sheltered, that's it. When you are
Okay.
sheltered, it's so like I feel like it's just natural for people to want to try something new. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it definitely could go poorly, and as we see it all the time. I know you do, especially like as leaders, you just watch people come and go. And I think, the Lord, you just, when you grow up in church, it's more about getting out of your mother's faith and into your own faith. You have to have your
Mhm,
own encounter with Jesus.
mhm.
Um, because like I was saying, like when I was little, party hardy, kids church was so much fun. We had a rock climbing wall. They did skits there. Like, I mean, I couldn't complain. The music was loud. I mean, it was
Yeah,
like a concert every Sunday just for our church specifically.
sure.
But like growing up and like honestly, yeah, like being in middle school, I kind of like lost that like church wasn't cool, and I'm
Hmm.
very like just focused on what everybody else is doing around me.
Hmm.
Um, and so I just didn't want to be there. I didn't think there was anything for me. I was like, I'm done going to church. I'm old enough now. I have my own, I'm independent while I'm 13 years old,
Wow.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think that mindset carries through a lot, especially if anything, it just grows more when you get into high school.
Hmm.
Um, and I think for me personally, the way I was raised, I have two older brothers and I love them so much. But they did a lot of things that kind of steered me away from wanting to try other things because they were trying it.
Mm.
And seeing the consequences of what they did
Yeah.
just was like, cool, it's not for me, you know? Like I see
Let's not and
what's
say we did.
let's exactly like let's put that on the back burner, you know? um
Yeah,
so I think at least the Lord, I was blessed enough to have that in my life because I feel like a lot of people don't, and that's why they have to go out on their own
right.
and do it. But you know, just as much with going out on your own and seeing what the college life is like and what drinking is like and what having your own decisions and living on your own, you know, just as much as you need to do that on your own, you also need to figure out who Jesus is on your own as well. You know,
Hmm.
you can't go off based off of what, you know, your pastor tells you or what your parents told you. And you just have to try it for yourself. That's really kind of my perspective on it. It's hard. I feel like a lot of people who grow up in church feel like they don't have a testimony,
Hmm.
you know, because we get used to these big ideas like, oh, the Lord delivered me from drugs, or the Lord delivered me from from I don't know, homosexuality or something, you know, something
Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah,
And like it's always so hard for people who grow up in church and they see that and they're like, well, what do I have to bring to the table?
right,
You know?
right.
And I think at that point, what it is just your determination to encourage other people to do it on their own.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of where my perspective, I guess that's how I would say my perspective has changed. So it would like looped around. Like when I was a child. When I was a child, children. There's multiple of me. When I was a child, loved Jesus and it was
Hmm.
simple. And then when I got
Yeah.
older, I let the world, you know, tell me that it was not as simple. But then when I had that own encounter and kind of just reminded myself what I used to be like when I was a kid, how simple things were, that's where it kicked in, where I could go back to being a child and being
Yeah.
like, no, it's not. It's really just black and white. Like,
Hmm.
Jesus is good and he has a plan for you. And if you don't know what it is, that's okay. It doesn't change that he doesn't have a plan for you, you know? So you just
Yeah.
have to be okay with it. So, yeah, I don't
That's
know if that
good.
answered your question, but
Yeah, yeah, it did. It like came full circle,
Mhm.
your journey. And we're all still on a journey, but it's like
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
scaffolding. So I love that.
Hmm.
That's really awesome. So what to kind of piggyback off that, I guess, what keeps
Yeah.
you anchored and fresh in your faith?
Hmm. That's a good question.
Because
These are all good
you're
questions.
still in college, you're still young, like you're still moving through life and like
Hmm.
what reminds you those things when everything around you, and this is everybody, not just you, this is everybody,
Hmm.
like everything's vying for your attention and your um thoughts and whatever,
Yeah.
how do you stay anchored and fresh in your
Feel
faith?
like it's so interesting. So for me personally, I'm a very logical person.
Mhm.
And the whole faith idea was really hard for me to get my mind around, especially, you know, like I mentioned earlier, you know, control is a really big thing for me.
Mhm.
Like I won't even let people drive me. Like I'm like, can I drive? Because I know I won't get us killed, you know?
Right.
I don't know about you.
Yeah.
um, so with that being said, it was just, I don't know, it was like this click and then just telling yourself over and over again things that you already know, you know? Like, one of the things, you know, something like we'll just take that. Something as simple as Jesus is good and Jesus has a plan for your life. Like we're told that all the time, but I feel like just because we know something doesn't mean it's in our hearts.
Right.
And that's kind of how it was for me. Like I would think things logically in my head that are logic. And then I would think things logically with the Bible, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Like
Hmm.
the Bible says that Jesus is good and that he has a plan for you. So if that's what he says, then I have to choose to believe that.
Hmm.
And it's more about like what keeps it fresh is just telling myself every day. You know, like the Bible says we have to surrender our flesh every day. Our belief is the same way, I feel like, you know, the Lord is good. He has a plan for me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what it is. It's just constant reminders of like telling yourself over and over again until you believe it and trust in it yourself. Like you're taken care of, you know?
Yeah.
So,
talk to us about your if you have like a mission or goals in worship ministry, or are you just kind of like, here I am, I show up and or if you're like, here I am and this is where
Hmm.
I'm kind of working towards.
Yeah. So I think in general, this is like, and I don't care where it's at, but I feel like when I was growing up, I didn't have any leaders. Um, I didn't have really any mentors. I obviously had Liz. Liz was probably the closest person to me, which I know you did an interview with her too. So
Mhm.
she's amazing. But in the beginning, like we just weren't that close. So it's not that I discounted her as a mentor, but she didn't really have, I didn't let her have much of an impact on my life until probably right now.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
so with that being said, when I was younger, I didn't feel like I had many people. So my goal now is like just to make sure I'm that person that I didn't have for other people,
Mm,
to
yeah.
be able to like just share and be real. And as you've already picked up, honesty is the best policy, especially with me. Love communicating, and you can't expect somebody to grow and be vulnerable with you if you're not vulnerable with them. And the Lord just
Right.
uses everything as a testimony, so you shouldn't be ashamed of anything you've gone through. Um,
Mhm.
so that's kind of like the generic goal is just to be basically a teacher. I really love discipleship. Now, I definitely don't want to be a teacher because I tried doing that. I took a couple classes
Oh
at
yeah.
PHC and I was like, oh, this is not for me.
Oh
But
gosh.
that discipleship, just giving advice and meeting people where they're at and saying like, hey,
Hmm.
I did that, you know, and not the whole like do as I say and not as I
Sure.
do thing, but
Yeah.
like, just giving them at least a warning, like, hey, if you go into that, this is what will happen, and I'll still love you through it. But like, just know, like, this is what happened for me. It's probably not going to work out any better for you.
Yeah.
And a bigger goal, I went to this part. I don't know if I share this part with you. And a bigger goal, I went to a conference a couple years ago. It was a Jesus Image conference.
Oh yeah.
Um, it was the first time I had ever went. Somebody very dear and close to me brought me. I had no idea what it was about. I just went for the ride. They even paid for my ticket. I was like,
Wow.
cool, let's go talk about Jesus, like there can't be anything wrong with that. And now I'm not really a big conference person anyways. I feel like there are a lot of hype. And I
Depends on
can't
which one.
imagine, depends. No, and you're so right. This one just wasn't. So that was great. Because I always am so like wary of like how vulnerable can you really get? Is this a
Yeah.
performance? Is Jesus really allowed to be here, or is
Hmm.
it, like timed and everything?
Hmm.
So when I saw this pastor preach, Brother Yoon, he has such an amazing testimony. I won't get into it, but it was just so crazy to me how much he still loved his country.
Mm.
And everything that they put him through, like he was jailed, he was beaten, he really, to sum up his testimony, it was very much so like the Apostle Paul.
Mm.
So but to come back to America and just he was singing, oh, it was so sweet. Oh my gosh, I love him so much. He was singing in Mandarin
Mm.
and teaching the congregation like how to say Jesus loves you in Mandarin, or just little phrases, just being, and I just was like, I don't know, I just was so engulfed in it. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is incredible. And I felt the Holy Spirit telling me, like, you're gonna go back. And I was like,
Wow.
no, I'm not. I was like, that's insane, like
Yeah.
I love China, but like I don't care that much.
Yeah.
And I feel like, everybody does this, like when they watch a good movie or like they get a motivational speech, they're like changed for a week. They're like, I
Hmm.
want to do like New Year's Eve goals, like
Yeah.
I'm gonna go work out. I'm gonna become this amazing person, and like the
Hmm.
world doesn't know the new me. And
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, maybe that's what it is. And this whole like you thinking you're gonna go to China will like fade off.
Mm. Yeah.
And then somebody, well, you probably know them, Blanca.
Hmm.
Um, Blanca had prayed for me. There was a leadership meeting at Calvary. I personally have never spoken to her. She knows my parents know her, but Calvary is huge. There's too many people
Right.
for me to say hello to, and I just never had a conversation with her.
She's
But
wonderful.
she is amazing. I love her so much. But when she was praying for me, she confirmed so much that
Mm,
I mean, if I never spoke to her, she never knew these things. So I had to be from the Lord.
mhm.
And she told me, and obviously it was the Lord speaking through her, but she was saying, like, the Lord had brought me here just to get raised up so he can send me back to save, to help save his people, my people. And I was
Mm.
like, that is so crazy. But
Wow.
like, ever since then, that's kind of like where I've been at. Like, my goal is to go back to China. Um,
Wow.
I don't know what it's gonna look like. I don't know if I'm gonna pull a Mitch and go there for 20 months, come back, and then go back there. I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
gonna live there or anything. But
Wow.
I had that's why I'm so like open when I said earlier, like I have no plans because
Yeah.
it's so impossible. Like honestly, I have no idea, which is so exciting. Just to know that the Lord has to do something crazy in your life for it to
Yeah.
happen. And that's it. I'm just sitting and waiting, and I'm asking the Lord, how do I prep for this? Do I need to learn how to speak Mandarin? Because if I do, that's really hard. Like, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
But and just like, I need to grow in like discipleship. I need to learn how, because missionary work is obviously different than just regular teaching, because you're teaching to
Yeah,
people who already know about Jesus. But these people, like depending on where I'm at, if I'm in the rural area, or in like, the city, some people are going to know what it is and some people aren't. And even with this
sure.
generation who are raising kids now, they don't even tell their kids about Jesus now. So like,
Mm.
maybe by the time I get over there, he'll be like, not, wiped out, but like, it's almost going to be like a new concept for people again.
Yeah.
So I'm just praying and waiting for the Lord to grow me and tell me when it's time and how to get there. So that's the
That's
big
so
goal in it all.
exciting. That's so exciting.
Yes.
Wow. That's huge.
For sure is a lot to think of.
Yeah. I think I just kind of see you now, like, in all the giftings that you have and what you do, taking that with you and doing that there with whatever specific ministry or whatever you end up doing. I can obviously everything that you're gifted with and you can do, that's just going to be such a cool thing to bring with you. And maybe that's, a huge, like what I was talking to Mitchell about, musicianary, maybe that's part of it,
Hmm.
so I think that's undoubtedly part of it, music is such
Hmm.
a strong part of you, so that's so
Yeah.
exciting. That's really awesome.
One of the things that I've like grown into is just making worship like simple. Like
Hmm.
anywhere you go, um
Hmm.
I love order. Especially like I think the way like you just taught me, the classical, like these are your notes and this is, quarter notes and half notes
Uh-huh.
and timings and time signatures, and then playing with clicks and such, for such a long time. I'm definitely a person about order.
Sure.
Um, but I also like I feel like the Lord has been speaking to me a lot about, like, it's so funny how the word that he chose, but like something that I feel like has been repeated a lot for this year for me, is like trending, like what's trending and what's not.
Hmm.
And like I feel like the whole song pattern thing, and the song order, like something fast, something medium, something slow, I just don't think that's something that I think people are becoming more hungry because of this day and age that we're living in.
Hmm.
That's not enough,
Hmm.
and I think my goal right now, there's just this new standard. Like I feel it, like honestly, for like the whole like nation, like mega churches and everything. Like I think people are more hungry to see something spontaneous and supernatural because they're trying to find it on their own. That
Hmm.
if we give them something that's manufactured or something that we know worked for us,
Hmm.
it's not going to work for them.
Right.
they need something more than that. And I think my goal as a worship leader going over there and even still like working at Gold Street is just keeping worship simple and keeping worship. Like
And what
no
it
more
is. Yeah.
and what it is. Just when we're together, I feel like there's so much power in just forgetting about everything and focusing on him
Hmm.
that he works more than that than you admitting that you need him. He knows that you need him. And I think when you close your eyes and focus on him and sing only about him and not about your situation, and not about your brokenness, he knows all of that. But I think when you take that step out and you worship him no matter what without even acknowledging it, I
Hmm.
feel like there's more power in that than
Yeah.
it is to you to admit it because you're already admitting it in your worship by not even saying anything.
Right.
Like just saying like, Lord, I'm going to focus on you because you're legit the only thing that can help me in anything. And by doing that, I'm not even going to think. I'm just going to think about how amazing you are and how
Hmm.
you deserve to be glorified. So I just think in general, there's just like for me, like I want to make a switch wherever I can go, like, to make worship simple about Jesus
Hmm.
and just letting the Holy Spirit have its moment and having
Yeah.
its time and letting him truly be welcomed in anything.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm
That's
done on
so
my tangent.
that's so good. And it reminded me, I've heard from a couple different places. I don't remember who, but you
Mhm.
know, that, you know, the more that we rest in and focus on and worship who he is, it kind of helps us remember and uh, it helps us remember like who we are and what our identity is, you know,
Mhm.
like focusing on him is like inadvertently helps us remember who we are. So,
Yes.
and that's so true, you know, and I love that. I love simple and confident, you know, I think
Mhm.
maybe you can relate to this, but when I was coming up through worship ministry as a young person, there's just so much stress put on like making, I mean, this is still a case to some extent, like making sure you do all the right things and say all the right things. And
Yeah.
when do we encourage the congregation to do this or that? Or how often do we jump or get hypey and, um,
Yeah.
and all these different things. But when the reality of it is, if you're not focused on what I think I should do based on what other people have done and what I think the people in the service, I'm trying to phrase how to put this, when I'm not focused on how I think other people want me to do it,
Mhm.
then I'm free to just lead and to just, it's almost like a teacher in front of a classroom, or
Mhm.
you're all there and you're just leading them. I don't know. It's simple, it's not
No,
meant to be
yeah.
complicated. So
Mhm.
this has all been super awesome. Good stuff. If you had a philosophy of worship and worship ministry, the ministry of it, what would it be? What would, or to kind of simplify that because that seems so huge. What do
Philosophy
you
is a big word.
what do you think every worship leader and church Jesus musician, what do you think
Mhm.
like they should know? Bottom line, the most important thing.
Hmm. The most important thing, I guess, having a strong enough faith in him that he'll show up.
Mm,
You know, like again, it's not really in our own strength. And I heard something one time like, you can do ministry without Jesus. And, that's something that I feel like worship leaders struggle with a lot. There's a lot of stigma around our pride.
mhm,
And, especially, having I guess, a platform, for lack of better
mhm,
words, at such a young age. My pride was through the roof. So I think, coming out of everything and obviously still growing.
mhm,
But I think right now my most important thing would say like for anybody is that if your heart is right and you're worshiping just to worship, then trust that the Lord is going to show up because
mm,
at that point, how could he not, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So, That would be my one
Wow.
most important thing.
That's important. That's really important. That's good.
I
Simple.
think music-wise, you should know all your chord charts. Like, you know all the keys, all the circle of fifths. It'll help you a lot.
Yes, that's also
But
very good advice.
yeah, that for music-wise, that is also the most important thing. I tell people all the time. Like, if you
Yes.
just know all your keys, you're set for life. But
It's true.
hmm
And once they know it, then they know it, right? So
yeah.
well, thank you so much for doing this. I super appreciate it. And
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
sure a ton of people will just love what you have to say and just sharing your heart and just love how honest you are and open. And like I said, when people are honest and open like that, people really get a chance to learn and grow from your life and your experiences. So, yeah. Do you have anything else you want to share or say before we kind of wrap things up?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I feel like I talked a lot, so
Yes. Well, I mean, not yes, like you talked a lot, but we
gosh,
talked a
you're
lot of
supposed to
good
agree with
stuff.
me.
Lots of good conversation and lots of yeah, just good wisdom. So, well, thank you so much. I super appreciate it. And I'll definitely be praying for you and where you're going, your ministry to the churches, your ministry to future ministry to China, which is crazy, but super awesome. So yeah, I'll definitely be checking in and seeing where you're at with all that.
Nice,
So
good.
yeah. So yeah, so just continue in all the great, wonderful things God has you doing. And love you so much. You're so wonderful. And it's been so cool to see where you are now from just like this tall. And it's exciting
I
to
don't
see
even make it on the screen.
right. And it's exciting to see where you're going from here. So yeah.